832, Engine 32, Battalion 31, Engine 33, Engine 38, and Ladder 31 if you're en route. This is a report of a commercial fire. We are being advised there's possibly a child inside. We got knocked down the fire. And we found the occupant, the room of origin. Copy, you have a victim and room of origin. Affirmative. Are we confirming stripe? Affirmative, citation.
The job takes a toll on each of us. And it doesn't mean that any one of us is broken or even struggling, but I think there's real value in acknowledging that the work we do as firefighters affects who we are and how we relate to people.
And I remember going on a call that was the first call I remember really affecting me with death. And that call was, we had a car come down on a person's chest while they were working on it, and the jacks slowly leaked off. And we got to the call, we jacked up the car and pulled the person out and went to start CPR on him, and it was a guy I went to high school with.
You're trying to hide, hold in all this stuff. Another analogy is that you have a backpack, rucksack, that all these experiences that come at you real fast and are intense, you just put them in your backpack. And if you don't take them out, look at them, and get rid of them, or just put them away in a different place, then that backpack keeps getting heavier and heavier and heavier.
Firefighters have one of the best jobs in the world. What other occupation allows you the opportunity to help others on their worst day? But this job that we love so much and take so much pride in can also take a toll on us, on our mental wellness. We want to normalize the topic of mental wellness because it affects all of us. But the good news is, open and honest conversation is starting to happen.
Firefighters have extremely stressful jobs. We're great at managing this to a point. But what happens when the accumulation becomes too great? Our compensating skills get maxed out or become unhealthy, and the stress we have from work bleeds over into our personal lives.
Let's start with the top 3 warning signs of first responder stress: hypervigilance, sleep deprivation, and substance abuse. When I talk about hypervigilance, I'm talking about a heightened state of awareness, and this is a key survival skill for first responders on duty. However, off duty, this can really create some problems in terms of isolation, apathy, and irritability. The second warning sign is sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation is the #1 precursor to any type of psychiatric disturbance. That includes anxiety, depression, nightmares, intrusive thoughts. It also impacts chronic pain, relapse on substances, and sleep deprivation also impacts how we learn and retain information. And substance abuse. When I talk about substances, I'm not just talking about alcohol. I'm talking about illicit drugs, gambling, pornography, and sexting. So all of these substances really work to anesthetize our feelings. Other warning signs include sadness, feeling emotionally numb or disconnected. It's like the wires to your dashboard gets cut and you don't get any feedback about how you're feeling. And a big thing that I see in my practice is decision fatigue. And decision fatigue is huge because first responders have so many decisions, many times life-threatening decisions to make while they're on duty. You couple that with sleep deprivation, and then they go home and they have more decisions to make. And over time, this really begins to wear people down.
At home, not being happy, not having any energy or desire to really participate in the home life with my kids, or having meaningful conversations with my wife that you know, actually had some substance to them. At work, I was feeling like I wasn't really, you know, living up to my potential, kind of feeling like I was getting let off the hook sometimes because my performance was lacking, but I had a good history, so I was able to get away with it. That's when I started realizing that there might be something going on that I couldn't just handle on my own or, you know, work through. It wasn't getting any better, so that's when I knew I needed to do something.
I thought that I literally was just built to see and experience trauma, visual, horrible things, and for it to just be categorized in my brain and my body in a way that wouldn't affect me. I didn't even necessarily think that I could take credit for it. I just kind of thought it was a reality, because for the better part of 20 years, I worked at very busy fire stations and went on some pretty horrible calls, going back even when I was a volunteer, and didn't necessarily feel overly impacted by it. So that's why I kind of thought I was immune to it, for lack of a better way of saying it. And what specifically brought to my attention that I was not immune to it was a series of horrible calls by anybody's standards, things like shootings and burns and fatality fires, and that culminated in a bad call involving some coworkers or people that I knew here at work. And after that, some pretty classic symptoms came up for me that I recognized, even though I wasn't really well versed on what that looked like yet.
The reality is that there's a lot of hurt that can come in the fire service, and we, of course, we see it. Oh, well, that's just normal, and we see things and deal with things, and I can deal with that. That's not a big deal. We watch out for other people, but it's not normal. It shouldn't be normal. And when you're using, or when you're having to find external things to give you that sense of calm, that sense of serenity, that's a warning sign.
I really wasn't a very happy person. I seemed angry quite a bit of the time. And right around then was when my wife was working at the mall and somebody got shot and died right at her store. When she called, she was very upset, and I remember saying to her, yeah, just don't touch anything, and the police will take care of it, and just stay away from it and you'll be fine. She's very upset, crying, upset, and I just had no sensitivity to the situation, thinking, well, everybody sees this stuff. It's not a big deal. It's just normal.
So when you see that or hear that noise a mama makes after she loses a child, or that elderly man who was supposed to die before his wife but didn't, you walk away and you sense a certain feeling or experience of this deep sadness or emptiness or loss. What we're experiencing is society's grief. As firefighters, we are shareholders in society's grief. Grief is not about death, it's about loss. So when somebody loses something, health, innocence, property, life, they're going to experience grief. The more traumatic that loss, the more traumatic and complex those grief experiences are. So now we arrive on the scene and we become a part of that grief experience. Well, because we've experienced it ourselves, we were there, it becomes a part of our experience as well. So we take a piece of that with us. A heightened sense of cynicism, sarcasm, these things that we use as coping mechanisms on the job, we begin to use them as coping mechanisms in our personal lives as well. Cynicism in our personal lives is antisocial behavior. I sit with my back to the wall in a restaurant so I can see everything and everybody around me. Why? Because I don't trust the motives of other people, even when I'm not on the job. Sarcasm is an emotional safety relief valve. When things are emotionally difficult, somebody cracks off with a sarcastic remark, we all laugh, and we continue to move forward.
I argue that 80% of your career is psychological. You have one of the most psychologically demanding jobs. Yes, you have to know the mechanics of your job. You have to be up on the latest and the greatest. But after that, what sustains you is your emotional wellness and your ability to manage your mental health.
That your brain is a parking lot, and every experience that you have is basically like a car coming in that you park. When you're calm and thinking normally, when you're not stressed out, it's easy to, okay, a new experience, I put it in my parking lot, I put it right where it needs to be, nice and organized, and I can go back and get that car out and deal with it however I need to fairly easily because I put it right where I needed it to be. Well, when you experience something high stress, your heart rate goes up, adrenaline, those things come at you fast. It's just get in there, just get in the parking lot, wherever you need to be, just make it happen. So over time, too many of those experiences, you end up with a jumbled parking lot, and the energy it takes from getting to point A to point B in that parking lot is way more than usual. So for example, I'm going through my day, just trying to handle normal tasks it requires way more energy and focus just to get from point A to point B with my thoughts. So by the time I made it home, to my family, I didn't have the energy or even the desire to really even, say, how was your day? How was your day today? And listen. For me, it was basically a big cloud over me all the time. Depression and anxiety, zero desire to participate with other people, with my wife, with my children, for a long time, long stretches, way more down days than up.
My lack of communication, my inability to talk to anybody in my family, in particular my wife, created an extremely big gap in our relationship. I knew for 100% I was getting divorced. I was done. I didn't want to talk about it anymore. I was over it. It was all a symptom of mentally not being okay, but I was done.
Because many times spouses just don't understand what it's like to be in the world of a first responder and what the work environment is like, where emotion and affect isn't the primary concern. And so when they come home to a spouse who is ready to talk and interact and maybe have more emotion, the first responder may seem disinterested. But that isn't actually the case. They've just had to utilize different tools and skills when they're on duty. And so when they make that shift back into the home environment, it's not always as smooth, and they need time to shift. And even just creating awareness that that's even going on for them is really, really important.
In the fire service, alcohol is all around us. It's a socially acceptable way to relax. It's part of our culture. But what happens when it becomes a problem?
Well, we hide the mental wellness aspect of, the job, life, and that leads to, for me, it led to self-medicating, a lot of drinking, just a lot of trying to bury it and hide it, and that just compounds the problems.
Why is alcohol so prevalent in the fire service? Well, alcohol is prevalent in society, right? You get done at the end of a hard day and you have a drink and you relax. And that concept, that's pretty ordinary for our culture. It's not foreign to us. So then you take a job like the fire service, a lot of type A mentality people, hard drivers who work really hard, and it's not surprising that we're going to play hard too. I didn't know it at the time, but it was not healthy for me. And for me, alcohol was just completely different. And at the time it seemed fun and exciting. And I didn't realize how dependent I would become with it.
I believe there is a combination of factors. First of all, in the first responder culture, alcohol in particular is a socially acceptable and appropriate way of coping as well as bonding with the crew. And alcohol in particular, as well as some illicit drugs, are really a natural elixir. And I really think that that contributes to the ease of use of alcohol because it's so quick and it's so reinforcing to utilize as a coping skill.
Post-traumatic stress is often associated with the military, but it affects first responders as well. Symptoms include flashbacks, nightmares, severe anxiety, or uncontrollable thoughts about an event.
I was having nightmares, reoccurring nightmares. I was literally seeing visuals that didn't exist. For example, when I would drive through an intersection, a specific intersection, I would still, even if I closed my eyes and opened them again, I would actually see the scene, the pattern of flashing lights, everything the way that it looked when I drove up to the scene, the night that I was on a call there, those kinds of things. Just being very restless, repetitive thought.
And many first responders experience symptoms of post-traumatic stress and should be a normal and expected part of what you experience on the job. Post-traumatic stress is no different than having a back injury. It is an injury, and it's something that is treatable and can be addressed. Post-traumatic stress can be related to one critical incident, but usually it's related to the cumulative effect over a long career or even just your first year of exposure. Because remember, first responders will see, touch, smell, walk through, slip on things that most of the general population will never experience. Let's face it, our nervous system is not built to see the things that first responders see and respond to.
There's a stigma in the fire service around mental wellness, which makes it difficult to have honest conversations and seek help.
I think the stigma behind mental wellness is, the suck it up and the, oh, you can't handle it. That's too bad. It's not right. It's counterproductive to taking care of each other. We would do anything for each other on a call. We would do anything for each other on the job. We work out with each other. We cook each other meals that aren't just trash, but we've been completely neglecting our mental wellness.
There is undoubtedly a stigma surrounding mental health. I don't think I can hang it just on the fire service. I think there's a larger cultural piece when we use the word mental health. And I think there is value in replacing that term with wellness, particularly in the fire service. I think mental health goes hand in hand with diet and exercise and a number of other factors. And the embarrassment that people have coming forward to discuss a mental health problem is slowly changing as we realize that there is a bigger picture and that everyone in the region really wants our firefighters to be the best versions of themselves. And a lot of times that involves a mental health angle, a wellness angle, and a lot of times it involves changes in diet and exercise and sleep cycles. And none of those pieces can stand on their own. In my experience, they're all intertwined.
In terms of why we don't talk about this as much, or certainly didn't for a majority of my career, it feels like a conversation is starting now, which is great, is for me personally at least, it really was about shame. I would say that's the number one word I associate with why I've struggled with this. And it took a lot of effort for me to wrap my head around the idea of sharing some specific struggles associated, with these work-related issues and some trauma and things that I was experiencing emotionally and mentally as a result of work-related calls and so forth. And I can only pinpoint that it was really about the perception of appearing weak or broken or less capable of doing your job than you were yesterday. These people at work have a view of you that's built on 20 years, and that view might be good, it might be bad, but it doesn't change the fact that it's you, that's who they identify as being John Ahrens. And I felt like who John Ahrens was had changed.
So I wasn't honest, I wasn't sincere. I don't know who goes through this life without difficulties. I don't know who gets through life without having faced situations without having the answers. And I think it is part of the job of being a firefighter. We don't talk about that. We're required to, identify a problem, come up with a solution, apply that solution, and solve the problem for people. And we're not supposed to come up short. We're not supposed to fail in our jobs.
The hard part is when you're getting into these jobs, you're expected to be a mentally tough person. I have friends and family and plenty of people, strangers, every day on calls that say, I don't know how you do this job. I thank you for being here because I could never do this job. So we're expected to be tough, mentally, physically. We're expected to be there at the drop of a hat.
When you see or experience something that is an incredible sadness or trauma in such a way that that's not the way the world is supposed to be, how else as a human being are you supposed to feel? Yet we try not to feel because it hinders our ability to do the job that we're trained to do. That is to help people. And so we balance back or come back on ourselves to say, well, if I need help, that means that something's wrong with me. No, it simply means you're human. A term that I like to use a lot, it's okay not to be okay. But the key to that is, what are you doing about not being okay? So we have to overcome this stigma that mental health awareness or a need for seeing a counselor or a need to even take care of myself using coping mechanisms that are balanced and they're healthy are a weakness. It's not. It's a part of being human.
Coming forward and asking for help is a big part of improving your mental wellness. The first step, be honest with yourself and recognize that things can be better.
I think it's really normal to feel anxious and hesitant to speak to somebody that you don't know, to discuss some of the most difficult things in your life. Remember, perception is everything. See counseling as an opportunity to upgrade yourself, to improve your life, and make really positive, healthy changes. One of my main concerns is that folks are waiting a little bit too long to come in, and then some of these issues and concerns become more of a permanent fixture in their life, and they have to spend a little bit longer in therapy to address that.
So what I did, or what I attempted to do when I realized something wasn't quite right was, well, I have some military time experience before the fire service, and they talk a lot about PTSD and mental health, mental wellness. So I thought the logical place for me to go was to the VA hospital in Seattle is where I went. And what ended up happening ultimately was that I did a 7-month outpatient group called cognitive processing therapy.
Pretty confident we were going to go through a divorce. We just didn't connect anymore. Luckily for me, she didn't allow that. She forced me to go to counseling, which I obliged for the sake of obliging. Come to find out it was extremely important. The first person I saw was not for me. It was not a person that I connected with. It wasn't a counselor that I felt comfortable divulging stuff to. I felt more like they were just trying to check boxes and ask questions. So for me, that didn't connect. I wasn't able to open up and release what I wanted to release internally anyway. So eventually, I wound up somehow getting connected with another counselor who had previous military experience, who was pretty laid back, and he just wound up saying, hey, this isn't your fault. I know what you're going through. It's not your fault.
You know, when did I realize that my drinking wasn't okay, or when did I become aware of that? And that's a tough thing to answer, because denial is so strong. You know, if I'm completely honest, it was years ago. I knew that it was wrong, and I knew that it had become, too dependent for me. But there was no way I was going to admit that to anybody else. And that, denial is so tough, because you're lying to yourself. And it's, what a crazy thing to, have one thought in your head and then immediately negate that thought in your same, in your head, and to lie to yourself, and then you start believing the lies. I finally got to a point where I just, something had to happen, And fortunately for me, I had people in my life that, pointed me in a direction. I had a battalion chief, Tom Shepard, who, he had no idea. I know he had no idea at the time, but he knew something wasn't right with me. And we had spent enough time with each other over the years that we kind of knew each other. Not like we were ever close friends, but we had known each other through different meetings, different things in the fire service. And he had the courage to sit down with me one day on shift and just tell me that things didn't seem right. Just didn't seem. He didn't, he wasn't coming to me as a supervisor. He wasn't coming to me, with any kind of threats or discipline. He just looked at me and said, things don't seem right. And if there's something I can do to help, I want to help. And man, my gratitude for that is incredible. I just never will forget that. And I know it takes courage to do that. It's not easy to look somebody in the eye and say, I don't think things are okay with you. And if there's something I can do to help, I want to help. How incredible it was that he was able to do that, because, it sparked something in me. And it didn't happen overnight. It's not like everything was better the next day, It still took time, over a year. But it was enough to just get things started for me. It was enough to just set things a little in motion that, gave me the ability to finally reach out and to finally say, I need some help.
So what resources are available to you as a firefighter? There's peer support. If your department has a peer support team, look up your peer support team members. They're a great place that you can go and just talk. Sometimes I don't need to have a problem solved for me. I don't need a counselor. I just need to get something off my chest. Peer support is a great place to do that. It's a confidential resource. You can call Code 4 Northwest. Code 4 Northwest is a crisis hotline for us, people in emergency services. The phone is answered by an active duty or retired firefighter, police officer, or dispatcher. They can do peer support, they can offer resources, point you in the right direction, get you connected with the people who are going to help you. You can go to the eLogic South King County Fire Training Consortium website under the Health and Wellness tab. There's a wealth of information.
When first responders come to counseling, they can expect to have a confidential and safe place to discuss their concerns in the context of a compassionate, therapeutic, professional relationship. They can also expect to receive objective feedback about what they're experiencing. You can also expect that your investment in the counseling session will take time. There are no quick fixes. There are no shortcuts.
We all have the opportunity and obligation to check in with and support each other. and create an environment where everyone feels comfortable and can talk openly.
I do it often is just on the way back from calls in the cab of the fire engine, talk about calls we've had in the past that still, run through my mind, how they made me feel, or just it was a crummy call. Just talking about that and letting people know that it sucked, it bothered me. I find that they open up, and once someone sees that, oh, he's vulnerable to the same stuff that I am, they feel like they can open up and start talking to me. And so like I said, it works both ways. I get it out of my head. They open up to me, get it out of their head, and then we talk about it in a calm way to help take the mystery away from it.
So the number one thing that I was committed to, even though it wasn't easy, was to just be open and honest about my own personal struggles, just so that it makes the conversation more normal around the beanery table, or it makes it more normal to have out in the bay or driving back from calls. And to have those conversations, not with just veteran guys that have seen a lot, but have those conversations literally with people on their first day. I've incorporated a conversation about wellness and mental health and traumatic calls into my rookie expectations discussion that I have with brand new firefighters on their first day. An important element now in being an officer in the fire service is that you try and stay in touch with what not only you're experiencing, but certainly what your crew is experiencing. And just make sure you keep that door open for them to get help or just to have a conversation. Doesn't mean you need to be nosy, doesn't mean you need to be doting with your crew, but it is your responsibility to know what everybody in your fire station has gone through in the last 24 hours.
Improving your mental wellness can be life-changing. We may not realize how far we've slipped or how unhealthy we've become, but there is a better life out there, and with help, it can be yours.
The first thing that I see in my first responder clientele is relief. Relief that they have actually taken a step to reach out and begin the process. Another major benefit of counseling is that first responders really begin to understand why they're experiencing what they're experiencing in the context of being a first responder. I can't tell you how many times first responders have said to me, "Thank you for letting me know that I'm not crazy." And I really want to send a message that what you're experiencing is actually expected given what you do for a living. How can you not be impacted? Additional benefits of counseling include learning rituals of disengagement, and I call it shifting from shift. How do first responders make that transition from off-duty to home? Because there really is an important transition period in being able to identify what you need in order to recover from shift.
So coming through that, being on the other side of it, like I said, I have way more good days than I have bad. The bad days they don't swing as low as they used to. I participate in my life again. I go home, I can ask how things were, hear about, my wife's problems, my kids' problems, my friends' problems, and not be so overwhelmed with my own stuff, whereas before I'd be like, I don't have time or the energy or desire to listen or help or do anything. You're almost a burden to me because of what was going on inside. Now on the other side of things, I have that capacity again to participate in, a functioning relationship. I like hanging out with people again. I like, I had hobbies. I do those again. It feels, I don't want to say normal, but I guess everybody has their own feeling of what normal is, but I feel like myself again. And just to reiterate, it's a process that I'm going to do, and I think we all are going to do for the rest of our lives. It's not just, oh, boom, I checked the box on that treatment, or I watched this video or something, I'm all good, or I had a talk with, talk to my wife or the crew, oh, done? No, unfortunately, it's something that it's a process.
Once I found that counselor that was able to listen and that I was able to talk to, and over a few months really got comfortable with as far as downloading my information and getting my experiences off my chest, it became huge. It became life-changing, and I was able to see my wife differently again.
So I don't want to make it sound easy, like, oh, I went to therapy for 30 days and everything was fine, because I still go a minimum of 2 times a month, continue to address those issues, and I really do look at it now as a lifelong maintenance on this particular subject. But specifically, I saw positive results almost immediately from turning towards some help that was outside myself. Along with that, I started to see that how our work life gets intertwined with our personal life. And so I don't know whether to call that a bonus or what, but as a result of unpacking some of the things that had happened at work, I also was able to wrap my head a little bit more around some things that were happening for me personally and how those things all interconnected. So I see that also as a benefit from going to the counseling that I went to.
So yeah, people ask me, you know, what's life like now, or how are things different for you now? And it's funny because in my mind, when I answer that question, you know, I say things like, you know, life is absolutely amazing now. And, you know, I can't believe you know, sometimes I refer to myself as a thief because I feel like the life that I have now, I've stolen it from somebody, because I had no idea that life could be the way it is today. I don't have an obsession to drink, you know, the physical side of it. You know, fortunately, I'm in a place today, as long as I stay active in my recovery and with my routine, I don't have that obsession. That physical obsession is gone. Most days I'm able to maintain emotional sobriety and not fall into those emotional mental traps that were really more about my disease than any of the physical or the alcohol itself. It were those things that you know, I couldn't get outside my head except to drink. And today I don't have to do that. It certainly doesn't mean that you know, life doesn't have its ups and downs. And you know, I have my tough times too, and I certainly make plenty of mistakes. But you know what? Living a mistake and being grateful for that mistake is so much better than trying to just erase it, trying to just forget about it. You know, having feelings of you know, anger or fear or sadness, and actually living those feelings is so much better than trying to escape them. And I just had no capacity for that before. I thought I had to just push all that away, that would prevent me from reaching this goal of life that, you know, I don't know what it was. I don't know what it was that I was seeking. But somehow I thought, you know, I had to achieve something. I couldn't have any negative feelings. And the only way to get through that was to try to bury them. And today I don't have to do that. I can live them.
The fire service as a whole is finally recognizing the impact this job has on our mental wellness. The culture is changing, and we're working to provide better support and education to our members and their families. Let's make mental wellness a priority so that you can have the best life possible on and off the job, both now and into retirement.
We're taught to, at a fire or a significant car accident, to call for help, and to call for help early and often, to strike that second alarm. You can always turn it back, but if you need it, it's good to have it there. And so we have that as a pretty standard practice now in the fire service. And I think that 100% relates to wellness also. Don't hesitate early in your career to ask for help early and often. The worst thing that's going to happen is that you're going to probably learn something about yourself. And the best thing that's going to happen is that you might avoid a significant glitch in your career that could have a significant impact even on your personal life, and nobody knows really where that goes after that happens. So to just ask for help early and often, and to do your best to avoid, to avoid shame, to avoid too much consternation about it, to feel like something's wrong. The more I learn about this and the more I talk to people, the more I see that it's a significantly more normal event in our profession with first responders, with cops and firefighters than I ever imagined just a few years ago.
For folks watching this video, if there are a handful of people who step forward and seek help because they're struggling, that will be wonderful. But for everyone watching this video, if it leads you to speak a little more freely at the binary table when someone asks you how you're doing, if how are you doing isn't just a greeting, then we will have really got something from this conversation.
It's not normal for the human being to deal with that day in and day out and not be affected by it. And affected doesn't mean that you have to be an alcoholic or a drug addict or, you know, have these massive problems. Affected by it can be, you know, very low level, just not communicating when you go home, not being the best spouse or dad or partner that you can be because you know, you've got this other stuff in your head. So we could be so much better if we dealt with it and lived in reality that we just need to talk it out. And it doesn't need to take, you know, I certainly don't think everybody needs to go to treatment and that, you know, like we have to make it this big deal, but it is something that we need to deal with, and we need to recognize that everybody is affected. It's not just individuals. You know, it's not just, you know, 3 out of every 10 firefighters that have problems with it. It's every firefighter has problems with it. And, you know, the best way to deal with that is to just deal with it up front and put the systems in place where we have support and care and we're talking about it. And for the most part, I think, you know, it'll be hard to see the results. It'll be one of those things where, you know, we'll ask ourselves years down the road, did we really do anything to change it? Well, it'll be hard to put our finger on that because there just won't be statistics. It'll just be people coming to work, doing their jobs, and then going home and living their lives and not having big problems. And that'll be the story of success, you know. Kind of how I talked earlier about how, you know, I feel like I'm living this amazing life, and when I really break it down, it's somewhat kind of boring. You know, it's this ordinary life. But ordinary life is pretty amazing. And I think if we can get to a point where we just have people that come to work and give their all and put themselves in a place to help others and provide that care, but then also put themselves in a place where they can go home and be their best selves with their family and their friends. What more could we ask for? That is success.